40%. And if I F9 that, well, it's gone dark. No, that's not what we want it to do. And the reason for that is because as you bring down the opacity, the background colour starts to show through more, and at the moment it's set to black. So we want to change that and make it a light grey. Don't want it 100% white, so just a sort of light grey will do. And let's try that. Okay, that's looking better. So if we just let this render a little bit, you can see we've got some grain happening there. It's not too pronounced, and the surface is still quite light, as brush metal is. So the other thing is we can use this same, and this is the power of nodes, is that once you've got one input, you can constantly keep dragging out these these inputs into other channels without having to copy and paste like you would do in the layout editor. So we can use this same input and grab the bump and stick that into the bump channel. But I actually want to bring down the bump amplitude, let's say half, 50%. Okay, and just make sure that's all working. Yeah, okay, the streaks are a little bit more pronounced now because of that. Right, okay, so the next thing to do, if we back to our reference image, is obviously you want to set up the specular highlights. We want to change the way that they normally appear. So if we go to the shaders menu and go to specular, and as we said before, this effect is called anisotropy, so that we want to set up some anisotropic specular reflection, not reflections, well, kind of cheap reflections, aren't they? So anyway, plug the colour of that into the specular shading, and at the moment they still look circular, as they normally look like in Lightwave. And the reason for that is because the anisotropy on the U and V direction are both equal. So what we need to do is we need to separate out these values so that they are opposed, really. So if we say 100% on the U and 5% on the V, we can now see that this specular hit is now stretched out in the direction that we want. And a good way to remember which way to place these values is that the U direction it seems to appear on the direction of the axes that you pick. So if I flicked it to X, you can see now it goes around the opposite way. So you can see the difference there. But in order to see that effect, you obviously need to separate out these values. So with all that set up, that's fine. While I'm here, actually, I'm going to bring down the specularity to, let's say, 80%. And let's just see what that gives us. I'll let this one render as well. Okay, so this is what we end up with. So we can see that the specular hit is getting, it's getting pulled in the direction that we want, but it still doesn't look like brush metal. Now, one of the big things here is obviously there's no reflection happening at all. So let's sort that out. So back to the shaders menu, and we want to pull down on anisotropic reflections, and we want to plug the output of that into its corresponding reflection channel and bring up the options again. So we want to match the same U and V direction, so we want 105 and Y cylindrical. Yeah, that's all fine. And as we pointed out before, this particular channel as well, sort of node, doesn't have any setting for how strong the reflections are, so we obviously need to plug something into the reflection channel up here. Now, most reflective objects in the world kind of have stronger reflection to, I'll go to the object here so you can see it. They have stronger reflections on the edge than they do face on to the sort of camera's view here. So we want to simulate that. So the way to do that is using a gradient. So if we bring up a gradient and we want to plug the output of the alpha into the reflection input and then bring up its options. So the input wants to be changed from X coordinate to incidence, and at the moment we're not seeing anything, and that's because we haven't changed any of these settings. At the moment, as it pulls in the incidence angle, it's using the same constant amount all the way along from the edge all the way to the front surface. So we need to change that over that distance. So if we add another key and set its position to 1, so this will be, this one here represents the edge of the surface, and this one here represents the sort of face-on view. And one of the things I like to do on these gradients here is, just once I've got these positions, is just lock them so that when I select them to change the values here, I don't accidentally move them. So if we go to the edge, let's say we want it to be 30%, and we're using the alpha here and not the colour, because we're using the alpha output to control the reflection amount. And face on, let's set it to 10%. Close that down and let's see what that looks like. Okay, so clearly we can see something happening, but it's way blown out. And the reason for that is because we've still got 100% diffuse. So we want to bring that down because it's making everything way too bright. So we could, as we did before, we could either use it, bring it down in the layered surface area editor, but we want to keep it all nodal. So I'm going to go to the Shaders tab menu and go to Diffuse, and let's bring up the Orania shader again and plug the output of that into Diffuse. And you see how it's updated and changed here. And I'm going to double click and let's bring that down to, let's say, 90%, and we also want to take advantage of this roughness setting as well, so bring that down to 10 as well. Now if I F9 that, it's not going to look that much different, or actually what it's going to do is it's going to smooth out, or we're going to lose, sorry, the grain. Now the reason for that is because